Who was Julius Caesar? Although we generally think of Julius Caesar's death when we think of him, especially the words from Shakespeare's famous play, E tu, Brute, Julius Caesar himself was a creative thinker whose experiences helped him become a strategic innovator, capable of dealing with nearly everything he faced. We can see this through his youth, his military career, and his political career. First, his young life. He was a noble from the house of Julia. This was a family that had strong connections to ancient Roman aristocracy, but they had kind of fallen from power recently. His dad died, and he was kind of suddenly the head of the family. However, his family's position did get him in a bit of trouble, because there was a man in power, kind of the peak of the patronage system at the time, a man named Gaius Marius. And he had a very strong competitor whose name Sulla. And what happened was Marius fundamentally transformed the army while he was in power. It used to be more of an upper class group of nobles who would volunteer, but he changed it into a more of an army of peasants that were motivated more by money because they were paid to be in the army. So essentially what this did was it gave him an army of people who were more willing to do anything and less driven by principle, more driven by money. And he was able to actually bring this army to march on Rome and kind of start a social war. So Marius came out of power and Sulla came into power. Now, this was bad for Julius Caesar because he had been made the high priest of Jupiter under Marius, which was a very important position. So Sulla had stripped him of this position, and Julius Caesar had to hide from him. But he actually eventually got arrested when, quote, one night as he was moving from one house to another, he was captured by Sulla's soldiers, unquote, and that is from Plutarch. And so he was taken by Sulla, and he got away by actually bribing the guards with 2 talents, which is a lot of money. In modern day, it's like a few million. After this, he escaped to Turkey, and he joined an army out there where he kind of learned to fight, and eventually was able to return when Sulla died. Now, he was a lawyer in Italy, and this was how he was kind of launching his political career, but he was not educated enough, so he went to study rhetoric in an island called Rhodes. As he was traveling to Rhodes, he was captured by pirates. And now here, there's a little story that tells a lot about Julius Caesar's character and upbringing as well. So they had captured him, and they wanted approximately $20 million in current day money for Julius Caesar's bail. Interestingly enough, Julius Caesar actually convinced them to raise his ransom to $70 million. You know, he's like, hey, why not ask more? Well, you got me here. They'll pay it. They have money. I promise you'll get the money. And so they did it. And this time that they spent together on this boat, he kind of started becoming more friendly with them. He would start, he would ask like, every morning they do like their morning exercises. Can I join you? Like, sure, I guess. So he starts kind of hanging out with them and doing things. And after a while, he starts kind of critiquing them, which is kind of weird. He says things like, oh, you're going to be rich. You need to learn how to talk right, or you need to learn how to read and things like this. So he'd kind of insult them. And he would even at times threaten to hang them, funny enough, because he was the captive. And so they kind of liked him and were kind of taken by his youthish simplicity. And he was kind of teaching them some things. But so after a while, his family paid his bail. And so after that, he came back and he just killed them all. Like he had promised so many times when he said he would kill them. So he came back, he took their boats and he crucified them. which is a very long and painful process of essentially slowly suffocating. But he was merciful to them and slit their throats after a few hours. So that tells you a little bit about Julius Caesar. But on to point two, his military career. So after this, he got involved in military leadership. He actually became the military governor of Spain, which is a big position. And in that time, military governor was governor. As I understand it, there wasn't much delineation between military positions and government positions. So Spain was kind of important because Spain was the main producer of olives. Now, Romans loved olives, and they used them for basically everything. They ate them daily. They used them for bathing. They used them for, lighting lamps. They used olive oil and things like this. So this was kind of a big deal, this position. And in this position, he was able to kind of meet a lot of the more high-ranking, political and other high-ranking political leaders. And this helped him to make some powerful friends, namely Crassus and Pompey. So Crassus is generally thought of to be like one of the most rich people who ever lived. Crassus was incredibly rich and influential. Pompey was actually a general, and he was very, very popular and also a great military strategist. Crassus himself, though, was a little bit of a con man, you could say. He worked for the fire department, and what he would do is he would set fire to buildings in order to make money. He would, set a fire and then kind of like come by, see a burning building, like, oh, look, want me to take this off your hands for you? It's going to be burnt in an hour anyway. So he'd buy it for really cheap and then put out the fire and be able to fix up what was burnt and sell it to make a huge profit. So that was kind of part of the way he made his money. So together, these three people, Pompey, Julius Caesar, and Crassus, actually formed the first triumvirate over Rome. So Pompey, as I said before, was a general, and he was very rich. So one of the benefits of being a general is when you took over a new area, you get new spoils. And so Pompey gave out a lot of land, and this made him very popular with a lot of veterans. This was another aspect of the triumvirate that made them very powerful, is Pompey's influence over military and former military people. So they worked together, and they became increasingly more powerful and had more control over the Senate. Julius Caesar actually became the governor of Gaul, which is modern-day France. Instead of Spain, he went there. And the special thing about Gaul, it was actually on the edge of the Roman Empire. And this allowed, as I said before, with Pompey, being on the edge of the empire allows you to take over new space and expand the empire, which also allows you to get land and money, and particularly slaves, which were all very, very expensive, and a lot of money could be made from selling these, and a lot of influence could be gained from handing them out and things like this. This was also kind of the way that Rome got a lot of its stuff done, was through slaves that it made from capturing other places. Had a very big this had a very big impact because this was like all their free labor and how they did things. So now soldiers really like Julius Caesar as well, and he really wants to grow his popularity. So what he starts doing is he starts making like adventures. Oh, voice crack. Adventures, and he like writes about them. He's trying to kind of build like a legend around him, like a narrative around himself. So he starts kind of writing about like the things he does. This is something he's doing around this time. And he's also beginning to kind of want more power. So one thing he does is he tries to undermine Pompey, who's now kind of a competitor of his, by having him marry his daughter. And this gets him very distracted from politics. as I said, he was writing things down, and it's working. He's becoming very popular. So he decides to kind of boost this by having an adventure. So one of his two adventures, actually, one of them is he builds a bridge across the Rhine River. This is a river on the other side is just like barbarian lands. And he built a very quick bridge. He built it with boats and wood to kind of, so it was like kind of a floating bridge. Or I'm sorry, they used boats to build it, so they could build it very quickly. And they essentially crossed over, like fought a little bit, and then just left like a few days later. It was really for the adventure. Another one he did was he went to Britain. So Britain was thought to be like the land of the dead because everyone there was very pale, it's very cold and misty, very mysterious. So he goes there. He says he's going to conquer Britain or something because that's very edgy and cool. And he gets there, and they see along the edge of the cliffs like a bunch of like warrior people lined up there. So they start kind of sailing around Britain, and they come to a beach. And when they got to the beach, there were horsemen waiting for them who had apparently followed their boat. And so they're going to attack them, but everyone's really nervous. So the story goes that one of his warriors, one of his soldiers, one of the standard bearers, threw the standard onto the beach and yelled for them to get the standard. And then they all kind of, got into the water and started walking up the beach. Anyway, it was not a very good battle. Some people died and they didn't really get anywhere. They took the beach, but he basically left a few days later. It was really for the adventure again. So this was happening, and Julius Caesar was getting more popular. Meanwhile, Pompey's wife died in childbirth, and Crassus wants to imitate Julius Caesar, so he's like, I'm going to go on an adventure, and then he just like goes to the Middle East and gets stabbed very quickly, so that didn't go well for him. Yeah. So something that happens after that is Julius Caesar in Gaul gets attacked by Vercingetorix, I think. And this is a big barbarian guy in France, and he goes to attack him, and Julius Caesar kind of beats them badly, and so they flee to a place called Alasia. And so there it's kind of like a small town or city. Julius Caesar builds a wall around their camp and just decides to kind of wait them out and starve them out. But as they're waiting here, in the middle of the night, one of the guys gets out and he runs to get reinforcements. So reinforcements are coming, and Julius Caesar actually builds another wall, and this one is around both his camp and the barbarian camp to protect them from the reinforcements that are coming. He also reinforced this wall with some traps. As Michael Chavon says, outside the camp there was, quote, a field of wood blocks with iron hooks, sharpened stakes in pits, 2 trenches, and a palisade with towers, unquote. So he was in this kind of situation where there were, barbarians, him and then more barbarians, and he was able actually to defeat them all, a feat which actually gained him much more popularity. Pompey hears about this because, a lot of people now he's catching a lot of people's attention, like people in the Senate, big political people. Pompey said that he was not worried about it because he could have the entire army of Rome come to his defense if he wanted. So now we're moving on to point 3, his political career. So at this point, a lot of senators are really afraid of him and are thinking about military action. But here comes Julius Caesar, and he actually crosses the Rubicon River at this point. So this Rubicon River kind of separates off the area around Rome where military presence isn't really isn't welcome. This is kind of the safe area, that area of politics and civility. And so he brings his army across the Rubicon. As soon as he does this, he says, quote, the die is cast, unquote. So, whatever happens, happens. He's made his decision and gone with it. So, everyone here is really scared. So he kind of, a lot of the senators, a lot of the senators run because they're scared, so they go and hide. But they actually forgot a lot of their gold, so when he shows up, he's just like, I'm rich now. And what ends up happening after this is he kind of just chases Pompey around a little bit. So he goes to, like, Greece to fight him. Pompey doesn't really want to fight Caesar because he knows he's going to lose, but he gets pressured into these battles by the Senate, and he actually ends up losing. And after this, he escapes to Egypt. When he arrives, the pharaoh, Ptolemy, his men, perhaps by the pharaoh's asking, decide to kill Pompey, who just shows up and they just kind of kill him out of nowhere. Perhaps they wanted to do this to gain favor with Julius Caesar, but when he saw the head of Pompey, he was actually very upset, and he killed everyone who was responsible. So after a while, he's really fighting off a lot of enemies. Julius Caesar, he really wants to become the sole dictator for life, and he eventually achieves it. After he gets here, a lot of people thought that he wanted to be king because he was buying a lot of purple, and he even had Mark Antony kind of like pretend to crown him, and he's like, oh no, I couldn't, kind of like, oh, no, I don't know, just some little publicity stunts. But this is still, this power is still threatening to a lot of people. So conservatives in the Senate decide to kill him. And they get Brutus as well. This is a very symbolic move because Brutus was likely his son, from what we can tell. So he was told in the lead up to his killing by a priest that, it's like the very famous quote, beware the Ides of March. But the priest actually told him, like, be careful the next 30 days, which were the lead up to the Ides of March. At a dinner party, it's thought that he knew people were conspiring against him, because at a party once, he was kind of hinting at some of the people who were conspiring against him, and he's like, I'd really love to die from stabbing. That's how I want to go out. Kind of like when it's like around your birthday, you're like, wow, I could really use a new baseball mitt. I don't know what people want for their birthdays. So it's thought that he knew, people were kind of conspiring against him. It's said that before he died, the night before, his wife had a lot of nightmares, and she told him all about them, and he thought about not going to the Senate that day, but he asked one of his friends what to do, and his friend was like, are you going to listen to a woman? Yeah, good advice. So he went, and he got stabbed 23 times, and that was not very pleasant. He died from that. Definitely died. Dead. One of the things he did, though, while he did have power as a sole dictator, which is very important, is he established a new calendar. What they would do is they had 355 days and add an extra month every once in a while. But he made 165 days with kind of like the leap year, very similar to what we do today. And he even made one of the years, he did this in the year 46 BC, and he had to add a bunch of years to this day, a bunch of days to this year to make it, to kind of like get back on track. So the year 46 BC was actually 450 days long, 455 days long, and the new calendar began the next year. So that is the political career of Julius Caesar. So although we generally think of Julius Caesar's death when we think of him, and the famous words, E tu, Brute, Julius Caesar himself was a creative thinker whose experiences helped him become a strategic innovator capable of dealing with nearly everything he faced. And we see this in his youth life, in his military career, and in his political career. Thanks, Gabe. I know it's really long. Sorry about that.